Jacksonville.
Jacksonville, Florida, home to nearly 1 million people. A city built on strong military roots and an industrious spirit. In the early 1900s, it was the birthplace of film in America, earning the nickname the First Hollywood. Every fall, the city comes alive for the annual Florida-Georgia game. That passion turned into a dream of hosting our own NFL franchise.
Membership has selected Jacksonville as the 30th NFL club.
Most cities got one hood, not in Jacksonville.
But behind the riverfront and the roaring stadium lies a darker side. With some of the deadliest neighborhoods in the nation and a crime rate higher than most U.S. cities, Jacksonville's shadows are as compelling as its sunshine.
As you all know, my name is Bill Wells. I fired more shots into the top of his head. What happened to my wife? I mean, I didn't even care about that. I shot him outside his head. I just fired. I don't want into my son. And he was still gurgling and breathing.
Welcome to Deadly Duval. On tonight's episode, we delve into a harrowing tale from the heart of Mayport, Florida. A story that begins with a brutal mass murder in 2003 and unfolds into a chilling saga of violence that even the confines of prison walls could not contain. This is the story of William Wells, who dubbed himself the Monster of Mayport. In May 2003, the tranquil community of Mayport was shattered by an unimaginable crime. William Wells, a resident of the area, committed a heinous act that would forever etch his name into the annals of Florida's most notorious criminals. Within the confines of his own home, Wells brutally murdered 5 individuals, including his wife. The victims' bodies were left to decompose inside the mobile home, a gruesome discovery that horrified even the most seasoned investigators. The details of the crime scene were nothing short of nightmarish. The air inside the trailer was thick with the stench of death, and the sight that greeted law enforcement was one of utter carnage. Among the victims was Irene "Tootie" Wells, Billy's wife, who had decided to leave him. In response, Billy shot her in the back of the head with a firearm, later describing in graphic detail how her face sprayed against the wall.
And she goes, "Now what are you going to do?" And I stuck it to the back of her head and I said this, and I pulled the trigger and it went off. And I literally defecated my pants. I watched her face spray against the wall in front of me, and she fell over.
Wells claimed that the shooting of his wife was an accident, though he also admitted that she had threatened to leave him. The conflicting accounts cast doubt on his true intentions.
And I got so mad that he wouldn't die that I started hitting him and kicking him and pounding on him that I even broke my hand.
Days later, Tootie's father, Bill McMains, arrived, likely searching for his daughter or his son, and met the same fate, shot and killed by Billy. Billy's violence didn't stop there. He invited Richard Reese over, claiming he didn't mind that Richard and Tootie had been intimate while Billy was out shrimping, as long as it wasn't in front of their children. Despite this, Billy shot Reese upon his arrival. Finally, Billy lured his drug dealer, James Young, to the trailer under the guise of needing more drugs. Billy claimed he killed James because the dealer attempted to steal his marijuana. James was shot dead. Prior to his arrest, Wells spread the bodies of his victims throughout the different rooms of the trailer and sealed the entrances with duct tape. He kept his 4-year-old son, nicknamed Froggy, in the trailer during the killings. During a 12-hour standoff with law enforcement, Billy ordered pizza and flowers, claiming that the latter were for his deceased wife. Froggy was eventually rescued by armored SWAT team members, who carried him out of the trailer. Billy expressed a desire for the death penalty and later continued his violent tendencies in prison, committing additional assaults and murders. But before we get to that, let's hear William Wells recount the chilling events that unfolded over 10 days. His confession provides a haunting glimpse into his mindset. It's worth noting that Wells made this call from prison to First Coast News, Jax.
As you all know, my name is Bill Wells, and I'm doing this interview to let the citizens of Duval County know what took place in my home between May 14th through May 24th, 2003. I'm here not to make excuses, but to inform you, the citizens and the taxpayers of Duval County, that I am willing to pay for my mistakes and crimes and to save the citizens and taxpayers of Duval County the expense of a drawn-out trial. I'm here for the death of my wife, Irene Marie Wells, also known as Tootie. I'm willing to accept a plea bargain from the state of involuntary manslaughter, for her death was truly an accident. For the deaths and murders of John McMains, my brother-in-law, Bill McMains, my father-in-law, Richie Reese, my wife's lover, and James Young, a drug dealer from Mayport, I'm willing to plead guilty of first-degree murder and accept the plea of death by lethal injection. Therefore, there is no need to waste the taxpayers' dollars, nor is there any need for Harry Shorstein or any other state attorney to use these deaths to further their political careers. So I'm here to inform you, the citizens, taxpayers, and voters of Duval County, that if any stall tactics take place in this case, then it will be the doing of the DA's office and Harry Shorstein for their political motivation. For we all know that that is truly what the death penalty is all about. And to the families and the victims, I am very sorry for your loss.
Richie?
He's the guy my wife dated before we got together. She broke up with him to date me. We got married. And I knew they were involved sexually while I was gone out on the tugboats, and I had no problem with that. I just asked him not to do it in the house where my kids were.
And how did he come to the house?
Well, I had called him several times, but I didn't call him over there to lure him over there to shoot him.
Right, that was on the streets, that's what people are trying to imply, that you were calling people and inviting them to their death.
No, that's incorrect. I called him over there. I wanted to ask him some questions about him having sex with my wife in the house, and I had no intentions of shooting him at this time.
Wells confronted Reese about the affair with his wife, and during the ensuing argument, Reese attempted to leave via the backsliding door.
He took his bag and went back to the sliding glass door like he was going to leave, and I said, dude, you need to answer this now, and I kind of kicked the sliding glass door back shut. So he reached down into his bag, and as he started to lift up, he had something black in his hand.
Right.
And I lifted the gun out of my pants and I just fired. I still don't even know where I shot him at, if I shot him in the head or the chest or the neck or what. I mean, it just happened so fast, but as I shot him, a cell phone charger went flying across the floor.
The fifth and final victim, 20-year-old neighbor James Young.
He was supposed to come over and bring me $850 worth of crack cocaine, but he knew I had a pound of marijuana in the house, and he tried to rob me for it.
Okay.
So that turned into a drug deal gone bad.
Okay.
You know, I didn't lure him over there to shoot him either, you know.
Right.
And I know that's what everybody's saying. Everybody's saying I executed my wife and then went on this spree, and that's not how it happened. I do want everybody to know that I would have never harmed my son, but the police didn't know that, and that was my bargaining chip.
What was with the flowers?
That was so I could say my final piece to my wife, because I did not murder my wife.
His wife, Irene Wells, known by all as Tootie, was the first to lose her life early on the morning of May 14th, a Wednesday. While Bill Wells clearly admits to killing 4 others, he swears his wife's death was a gun accident, a gun belonging to Tootie's brother, John McMains.
She died in the morning around 6:30. She was getting ready for work, and she pulled her brother's gun out of her purse that had no clip in it, and I noticed there was no clip in it. I said, what is that for? And she jokingly told me, this is in case you get stupid today. And I laughed about it. And she kind of stuck it over her left shoulder with her right hand, you know, and just pointed it at me. And I kept leaning over and, you know, slapping it in and out of her hand, you know. And I finally grabbed it by the slide, and I kind of tossed it up in the air, and I grabbed it by the handle. And she goes, now what are you going to do? And I stuck it to the back of her head, and I said this, and I pulled the trigger, and it went off. And she fell over. And I jumped down there and I grabbed her by the throat with my 2 fingers to check for a pulse. And when I rolled her over, her face was gone, literally gone. An ambulance could have done nothing for her. And being a convicted felon and having a firearm in my hand, I knew that I was going to end up in this position anyways. And I was scared to death. And I had loaded it because John's almost 500 pounds, and he's a big boy, and I didn't want to mess with him. But I had no intentions of shooting him until he took off into the room and started getting hostile, at which point, when I went into the room and I heard 2 shots, I fired around the corner, which caught him in the side of the head, when I looked around the corner, he was holding his head and blood was pouring out. When I fired and seen that he was like that, I come around the corner to get closer to him to look at him. He grabbed me by my sleeve, and I was so scared I pulled the gun and I fired 2 more shots into the top of his head. I really didn't know what to do. I kept thinking what was going to happen, and I was expecting the police to show up at any time. I figured somebody heard the gunshots. But nobody ever came. So I fed my children, let them watch TV, and I smoked a little marijuana, and I had snorted a little bit of cocaine at this time. But I was not high at the time of the initial accidents in the morning, you know.
2 days later, Bill says Tootie's father, Bill McMains, came to the house after he hadn't heard from his son John or daughter. McMains had a key, and a surprised Bill Wells found himself in another confrontation.
He come in and he walked into the room and seen Tootie, and he ran to the kitchen and got a knife, and I had seen him, and I pulled the gun out. Well, he went back towards my son's room, and he went in there, and he when he made that, I shot him in the side of the head, and I drug him on into my son's room, and I covered him up with some blankets, and I brought my son's clothes out of the room, the bulk of his clothes out of the room, and I shut the door and wouldn't let him back in there. I just want people to know I'm not doing this for the easy way out. I have a tremendous amount of guilt, and I should. And I'm sorry does not say enough to the victims' families.
Tonight, Bill Wells is off suicide watch, and he has a taste of creature comforts. He now has clothes to wear, socks on his feet, his eyeglasses, and a pair of Bibles in his cell. And today he was allowed to shave for the first time since being taken into custody a week ago Sunday. But he says that all pales next to the news that a grand jury this morning indicted him for murder, and State's Attorney Harry Shorstein will seek the death penalty.
I've been kind of like a kid on Christmas Eve waiting for Christmas Day to see what gets unwrapped, and now that I've had it, and when he handed it to me, I guess you could say I was like a kid with the best Christmas present ever given.
Shorstein says the comments made to police during the SWAT standoff and the confession by phone to me Sunday night would be admissible evidence.
It seemed to be a lucent, it seemed to be a very intelligent explanation of what occurred. So it would be a matter considered with all other relevant evidence.
While serving his life sentences at Florida State Prison, Wells's insatiable thirst for violence resurfaced. Wells attempted to murder a fellow inmate in 2008. He was convicted of attempted murder and received an additional life sentence for this crime. In 2011, Wells murdered an inmate at Florida State Prison. Details about the victim and the method are limited, but the crime resulted in yet another life sentence for Wells. On July 5, 2019, William Wells and fellow inmate Leo Boatman orchestrated a brutal and premeditated attack on inmate William Chapman at Florida State Prison. The murder carried out in the prison's day room was as methodical as it was horrifying. Wells and Boatman had planned the attack with chilling precision. Both men had been serving life sentences, and their frustration with prison life, combined with Wells's stated desire to be sentenced to death, became the driving force behind the crime. According to later testimony, Wells viewed death row as a better option, where he believed living conditions would be more tolerable than the general population. That morning, Chapman was in the day room, an area where inmates gather under the supervision of guards. Without warning, Wells and Boatman initiated their assault, using handmade shanks crafted from materials smuggled or fashioned inside the prison. The pair ambushed Chapman. First, Wells and Boatman wrapped a makeshift ligature, a strip of cloth or fabric, around Chapman's neck. They choked him until he was subdued, rendering him defenseless against the onslaught to follow. Once Chapman was incapacitated, the duo took turns stabbing him. The shanks, sharp and deadly, inflicted multiple deep wounds across Chapman's body, particularly in the areas that would ensure rapid blood loss and eventual death. The attack wasn't quick. For over 10 minutes, Wells and Boatman continued their assault. Chapman was beaten with fists and possibly other objects in the room. The prolonged nature of the attack demonstrated the calculated cruelty of the perpetrators. Witnesses and later reports described the scene as chaotic, with blood spattering on the walls and the floor of the day room. When guards finally intervened, Chapman was unresponsive. Medical personnel attempted to save his life, but the severity of his injuries made it impossible. Chapman was pronounced dead at the scene. In subsequent interviews and court hearings, Wells admitted to his role in the murder, openly declaring that his intent had been to secure a death sentence. The premeditated nature of the crime, combined with the brutality and Wells' open confession, left little room for ambiguity in the court. Wells was charged with first-degree murder for his role in Chapman's death. Leo Boatman, already serving life for his own heinous crimes, faced additional charges as well. This murder not only underscored Wells' dangerous and remorseless character, but also highlighted systemic issues within the prison system, where violence and brutality often go unchecked. The death of William Chapman serves as a grim chapter in the story of a man whose capacity for cruelty seemingly knew no bounds. In a 2011 letter to First Coast News, Wells suggested that if prosecutors had pursued the death penalty more vigorously during his 2003 trial for the Mayport murders, subsequent deaths could have been prevented. He wrote, "If prosecutors were more thorough in convicting me in 2003 of the Mayport murders and pushing fervently for the death penalty, no one else would have to die." Wells has expressed a desire for the death penalty, indicating that his violent behavior in prison is a continuation of his quest for execution. In his communications, he stated, "I guess my quest for the lethal injection continues, and more time goes by." These statements reflect Wells' perspective that the justice system's failure to sentence him to death initially has led to further violence, a viewpoint that he has communicated through letters to the media. The courtroom was filled with palpable tension as the judge pronounced the death sentence for Wells in 2021, granting him the very outcome he had sought. Despite making multiple appeals, Wells showed no remorse, often bragging about his murders and stating he had no regrets. His actions had reignited the debate over the death penalty in Florida. William Wells' reign of terror, from the brutal slayings in his Mayport trailer to the cold-blooded murders within prison walls, paints the portrait of a man whose capacity for violence knew no bounds. His complete lack of remorse and continued violence serve as a chilling reminder of his nature. We highlight this story not to glorify William Wells, but to examine the systematic failures that allowed his atrocities to continue and to shed light on the devastating impact his actions have had on his victims and their families. This narrative serves as a stark reminder of the importance of justice, accountability, and the ongoing need to protect society from those who perpetrate harm. Thank you for joining us tonight on Deadly Duval. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are not the ones found in our nightmares or under our beds, but those who walk among us in plain sight. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and join us next week for another chilling tale from the shadows of Jacksonville's past. Good night.